across sub-Saharan Africa. 42% of households have TV penetration, with 65% of households receiving free-to-air content, which, still makes a lot of sense given the access to connectivity, guys, data and Wi-Fi and all of that. But that's what the figures are looking like at the moment. Now, is the growth of streaming services phasing out traditional TV entertainment? We speak to tech writer Mudiwa Gavaza, who's recently published an article regarding this conversation. Let me just backtrack a bit. If we still have 65% of people that are still receiving free-to-air airtime, I'd say it's a gradual transformation. But let's hear what my guest has to say, Mudiwa. Good morning, Mudiwa.
Good morning.
How are you?
No, I live good, well, and thriving on this Sunday morning.
Awesomeness. How have viewership patterns changed, looking specifically at the past few years?
So one of the big things that's happened over the years is that people have started switching some of their consumption behavior to online. And one of the biggest two things you can think about is the fact that once upon a time, for you to catch a TV signal, you needed to have the bunny ears on the TV, to make something like that happen. But now you can catch a lot of that using your online channels. It has been quite a move over time. Some people will remember the words digital migration, which basically speaks about the move from analog to digital TV. And all of that has been in preparation, for people to be able, to access that content, either using a normal TV that has what's called a digital tuner, or at the same time, what's happening in terms of the online space. So we've seen a huge substitution, when it comes to that, and at the same time, we've also seen changes in what people consider streaming. If you think of streaming, right, you can think of YouTube. You go there, video on demand, you watch whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. Same with Netflix and others. Whereas on the other side of that, you have live broadcasts that are now being streamed online. So DSTV now, SABC Plus, EVOD, exactly the same thing, where basically you're getting exactly the same thing as you get on the TV, in terms of your aerial broadcast, etc. But you can now just view the same thing online. So I'd say those are the two main shifts that we have seen in terms of that streaming space.
How I see this whole thing is, because I think even just the percentages are not completely accurate, considering that you still have spaces that are not accounted for, like informal settlement and stuff like that, where 1 yard is sort of like watching. It's not the same for each, yard, guys. I'm not saying that to say it's the same. They're watching one TV that is connected, but you find like it's a big space, and then there's different small homes, and then they're all watching TV from like the main house in a way. So you'll find that it's still a lot of people that are kind of watching the traditional way. But how I see it is how the black and the black and white TV was phased out by the color TV, where the color TV used to be the most, you can afford. It's expensive. Then the color TVs started being more cheap and easy to make, so you could find a lot of color TVs. So it was easier for black and white TVs to be phased out, even in homes that then were perceived to not have been able to afford color TV. So that's how I see this whole access to streaming with connectivity and being able to have Wi-Fi and stuff like that. That's how I see it coming through. The more, you have Wi-Fi providers, being competitors to the giants or the ones that are in the business right now, it's somehow going to make Wi-Fi and connectivity cheaper for people who will then be able to consume content via the streaming side. But back to this now. Are traditional TV entertainment platforms still important? Looking at traditional media specifically.
I'll answer your question in two ways. The first one, just touching on what you just mentioned now, we already see big moves right now in terms of the connectivity piece and trying to make the streaming aspect cheaper. When you think about a platform like View, which is one of the local providers, View does a lot of on-demand local content shows there on View. They have deals with the likes of Vodacom and MTN, where you get special bundles for you to be able to stream at a cheaper rate and watch TV. Because you can imagine, if you're purely streaming, right, that's a lot of data. That you have to be able to consume. So in many instances, you need to have special bundles. We've seen DSTV, for example. DSTV has a deal with MTN where they now have something that they call DSTV Internet, where basically DSTV now comes in as your internet service provider and they take over all your Wi-Fi needs in your house, which then includes the streaming aspect, and then you're able to be streaming DSTV, Showmax, etc., at that cheaper rate. So we are definitely seeing those moves, those deals in place. It's a model that has been there in the United States for quite a while, where your entertainment provider is your connectivity provider as well. So there's that aspect. Second aspect is traditional platforms still carry a lot of importance, a lot of relevance, especially for those communities that do not have access to connectivity, because you can just switch on a TV, have an aerial, and you have access to entertainment. And that's a much lower barrier than having to get a router, get fiber, subscribe for an unlimited plan or whatever it is, and then connect a device and then go online to actually access your entertainment. So it still carries a lot of importance, and that's why you then see the numbers that you were quoting earlier on, how many people in South Africa are still using free to air. However, from a revenue point of view, we are seeing that in many instances, people would rather deal with a streaming player than deal with traditional broadcasters. Right now, there's a big battle going on to try and take over Warner Brothers. And that deal sort of tells us where we are in the market, because Netflix just wants Warner Brothers on its own, Warner Brothers and HBO. So the studio, HBO, and the streaming service. Whereas Paramount wants the whole thing, including the TV services. And Netflix does not want the TV services at all, because they see no value in having that traditional TV. So I think a deal like that, from a global point of view, gives us a view of how the industry is viewing the traditional aspect. Otherwise, for ordinary people, traditional still carries a lot of relevance.
I mean, I was working on the TV side on Friday night, and I caught SABC 2's new talk show, and for a minute I asked myself, when we commission new program on traditional TV in that way, like, how do you balance, because TV still has its own traditional format, you know what I mean? Although now we are seeing podcasts getting into the TV side, like broadcasting corporations are commissioning podcasts now, putting them on TV. So it looks and feels like a trial and error. Like, how does this making content for digital streaming services and making content for traditional TV side of things, like, what do you do? How do you find that middle ground to say, should one day this kind of content have to move on this platform? Will it live online? It's kind of a tricky one to commission content lately. I just want to hear your thoughts around that.
So one of the interesting pieces about what you've just said, if I just touch on podcasts for a moment, we've seen a lot of big deals happening of late. DSTV bought up a number of podcasts last year, including the rights to broadcast. I believe it was Podcast and Chill by Mac G. That was one of the deals we saw last year. We've also seen the likes of Netflix buying up the rights to, stream some of the podcasts on their platform. SABC in South Africa has also been taking on a lot of podcasting content to put on their platforms, particularly on SABC Plus. And in certain corners, people are actually saying that we might see the word podcast actually being used less and less, where they're just going to be shows because it's just become that mainstream. So that's one way to think about what's happening there. The other thing is the fact that if you're a broadcaster, especially the likes of MultiChoice, SABC, and ETV, you're trying to balance the live streaming / live broadcast aspect that we spoke about earlier on versus the on-demand aspects. DSTV's platforms are probably a good distinction because DSTV puts its on-demand content, stuff that you can just access any time of day, onto Showmax. And then the stuff that you're watching live in the moment, where you have to follow a programming schedule, that you can find on DSTV now.
Yeah.
Yes, they do have some on demand, but it does there. So in terms of commissioning content, it does seem like a lot of providers are trying to do this dual aspect where you program something and then it first broadcasts on linear, what people call linear television, and then it's found on demand, on whatever platform they use. These days, it seems like a lot of the players are trying to control the platform, the on-demand platforms, because you remember back in the day, SABC specifically, you would have certain shows like Uzalo and others, and they would air the show, and then a day or two later, that episode is on YouTube, right? But over time, they started actually taking away that content from YouTube as much because they wanted to make sure that they have their own platforms, right? Or at least you're getting more money out of it. So you're signing deals with View, you're doing the SABC Plus thing. So that does seem to be the way in which people are commissioning shows. The most interesting thing to me is that streaming has brought in on demand where I think Netflix really introduced a culture of binge viewing where you can sit and watch an entire series in one day, 10 episodes in one go. But one of the interesting trends right now is that we are seeing some of the other streaming players. I think of the likes of Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus is a pure streaming platform. However, the way that they show their content is that they are releasing their shows 1 week at a time. That traditional mindset from back in the day, except that they're just doing it on streaming. So it does seem as if we still live in this hybrid when it comes to commissioning shows and where those shows are flighted and where those shows end up actually residing in the long term.
Oh, this is my kind of convo. I can talk to you the whole day about this, but 2011, and I have to go to the news. But where can we access your article real quick?
So on the Business Day website, you can just search for Mudiwa Gavaza and you'll find, all the content that we write about. I specialize in technology, media, and telecoms. This discussion is firmly rooted on the media side. On social media, it's at Mudiwa Gavs across all platforms.
Right, and just like that, it's the top of the hour, 11 o'clock. I have to go to the news.
SABC News.